Module 2 is about the hormones themselves. It will be helpful if you have your handout called the hormone list and fill it out as you go through this module. The objectives of this module is basically to describe the source, target, and function of the selected hormones. So you should know which gland secretes that hormone, what place that hormone targets, and what does it do when it gets there? How does it change the function of that cell? The hypothalamus is the master gland. It is in charge of most of the hormones. It controls the release of hormones in 3 different ways. First, it makes 2 hormones which are sent to the posterior pituitary via an axon, and upon stimulation by the hypothalamus, these are released. Second, it controls the release of releasing hormones or tropic factors which travel down via the blood to the anterior pituitary, and then the tropic factors control the release of different hormones from the anterior pituitary. So essentially the hypothalamus is controlling the anterior pituitary hormones release. Last, the hypothalamus, upon detection of stress, which can be real or imagined, and we'll discuss that later, will stimulate the release of epinephrine from the adrenal medulla. The hypothalamus uses both the nervous system and the endocrine system to help maintain homeostasis. The next several slides will briefly explain what these hormones from the hypothalamus and pituitary gland are and what they do. So here's a picture from the visual A&P text that shows the hypothalamus up here at the top controlling the pituitary gland. And remember, there's 2 parts to the pituitary gland, the anterior and the posterior lobe. Okay, and so there's a couple of hormones made up here in the hypothalamus, stored in the posterior pituitary, that are released when the hypothalamus says so. And then the hypothalamus itself will make some hormones that travel to the anterior pituitary and cause release of another hormone from that gland. The hypothalamus does produce 2 hormones itself, antidiuretic hormone or ADH and oxytocin. They are made in the hypothalamus, transported to the posterior pituitary, and wait there until the hypothalamus tells them to be released. They are usually released upon a nervous system stimulation that is detected by the hypothalamus. All the next several slides, or all the hormone slides, are set up very similar to this one. The first bullet point is the abbreviation or another name if there happens to be one. The second bullet point will say where that hormone is released from. The third bullet point tells where the target for that hormone is. The fourth bullet point tells the function. And the fifth bullet point talks a little bit about its regulation. So antidiuretic hormone, also called vasopressin or abbreviated ADH, comes out of the posterior pituitary, targets the kidney, and tells that kidney to save water. In other words, you pee less when ADH is released. It can also play a role in the cardiovascular system by increasing blood pressure when it causes smooth muscle contraction of the blood vessels. It is completely controlled by a nerve impulse from the hypothalamus. When the hypothalamus detects you're dehydrated, it zaps the posterior pituitary, ADH is released, goes to your kidney, says save the water. The second hormone produced by the hypothalamus is oxytocin. It comes out of the posterior pituitary. Its target is the uterus and the breast. It functions to stimulate labor or milk ejection. It also seems to play a role in sexual arousal. Weirdly enough, men also produce oxytocin, particularly when they're bottle feeding their baby, and it's thought to play a role in bonding. It sometimes goes up also in men when they have sex, making it sometimes called the love hormone, as it may play a role in bonding men to that partner. Very interesting research with oxytocin lately. The hypothalamus also releases hormones itself, sometimes called releasing hormones, that stimulate the release of another hormone, called a tropic hormone, from the anterior pituitary. Notice across the top of the diagram here, CRH, TRH, GnRH, etc. causes the release of another hormone from the pituitary. So CRH causes the release of ACTH, TRH causes the release of TSH. The next several slides will discuss this pairing or strange setup of why we have to have many hormones to get this bottom one out, which actually does the action. Okay, so each one of these can be thought of as a separate system. So starting with TRH and TSH. TRH, thyrotropin releasing hormone, comes out of the hypothalamus, travels to the anterior pituitary, and causes a release of TSH. TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, comes out of the anterior pituitary, targets the thyroid gland, and causes release of thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone is ultimately going to have the effect on the body, but it's actually a three-tiered system in order to get it released. Similarly, corticotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus targets the anterior pituitary and causes a release of ACTH. ACTH is called adrenocorticotropic hormone. It comes out of the anterior pituitary, targets the adrenal gland, and causes the release of corticosteroids or glucocorticoids. GnRH, or gonadotropin releasing hormone, comes out of the hypothalamus, and it too targets the anterior pituitary and causes the release of two different hormones, FSH and LH. FSH is follicle stimulating hormone, and LH is luteinizing hormone. They come out of the anterior pituitary and target the ovaries and testes, and they play a role in egg and sperm production. FSH does that. LH causes ovulation in women and causes the release of testosterone in men. This system, GnRH, FSH, and LH, does not happen until puberty in people. The first two, right away, you have thyroid hormone and corticosteroids. But these two, FSH and LH, aren't going to appear until GnRH does, and GnRH is not released until puberty. Growth hormone releasing hormone, and there's also a growth hormone inhibiting hormone, come out of the hypothalamus and control the release of growth hormone. GHRH will increase growth hormone release, and GHIH will inhibit growth hormone release. Growth hormone from the anterior pituitary generally targets the liver and causes the production of IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, which then tells the muscles, bones, and fat to grow. It also causes gut organ to grow a little bit. We'll talk about that a little bit more on this next slide. Growth hormone through IGF-1 makes your bones and muscle grow, but fat, it actually causes fat to be broken down. The idea being, if you release growth hormone, you need to build muscle, and fat can be shrunk or burned in order to fuel that process. More recently, growth hormone has been used in patients who have muscle wasting disease or the elderly. It will actually help their muscles grow at the same time reduce fat deposition. Prolactin releasing factor and inhibiting hormone also come out of the hypothalamus, target the anterior pituitary, and either increase or decrease the production of prolactin. Prolactin itself targets the breast and induces the synthesis of milk. Okay, its major role is to stimulate milk synthesis. All of the ones that we've just talked about, the hypothalamic pituitary hormones, are controlled, or the levels of them are controlled by a negative feedback pathway. So the hypothalamic hormone comes out, targets the pituitary, which targets that hormone, targets an endocrine gland somewhere, and then those hormones all have targets, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But when the level of the pituitary hormone, for example, gets high enough, it'll shut off the releasing factor from the hypothalamus. Or when the level of the endocrine gland gets high enough, it can feed back and turn off the pituitary or the hypothalamic hormone. For example, in this slide here, GnRH causes the release of SSH, which causes the release of estrogen or testosterone, which go on and have effects on their target cells. But high levels of estrogen will shut off GnRH or FSH, and FSH levels high enough will shut off GnRH. This keeps these hormones at a fairly level state most of the time. Now the difference is estrogen, they can cause changes in amount depending on whether a woman is pregnant or not. and during the ovarian cycle the levels change. This is true with all of these hormones that we just went over. TRH, TSH, and thyroid hormone self-regulate. CRH, ACTH, and glucocorticoids self-regulate through this negative feedback pathway. So in summary, you can see the hypothalamic hormones control hormones out of the pituitary gland. Don't worry about the three on the right here. So the hypothalamic releasing hormones are at the top. The pituitary glands here are in purple. These hormones go and target various sites in the body. Hormones released into the blood from the hypothalamus all target what cells? The anterior pituitary. Where are the receptors located on the cells of the pituitary gland if all of these hormones are protein hormones? Remember, protein hormones bind cell surface receptors, so all the receptors for the hypothalamic hormones are located on the cell surface of the pituitary gland. The thyroid gland, located in the neck, shaped a little bit like a butterfly shape, you can see there, produces two hormones, thyroid hormone and calcitonin. Thyroid hormone is known as T3 or T4, the 3 and the 4 referring to molecules of iodine in this hormone. T3 is the more active form. It comes out of the thyroid gland and targets liver, bone, adipose, almost all cells in the body can be affected by thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone targets these cells and increases metabolism. The rate of burning carbohydrates in particular goes up when thyroid hormone is released. It also plays a role in growth and development during fetal development. Pregnant women are all checked for thyroid hormone levels because if it's too low, the baby could be born not only small, but mentally impaired. Generally, negative feedback through TSH and TRH controls the level of thyroid hormone to keep it fairly level throughout your life. The other hormone released from the thyroid gland is calcitonin. Calcitonin targets the bone and the kidney and tells them to lower blood calcium, CAL, calcium lowering hormone. Okay, it tells the bones to soak it up or take it in and store it, and it tells the kidneys to pee it out. Okay, the overall effect is lowering blood calcium. So if blood calcium levels got too high, calcitonin would be released and cause the kidneys and the bones to soak it up or get rid of it. The parathyroid gland is located behind the thyroid gland, and you can see the 4 little parathyroid glands on the back of the thyroid gland. It also, besides having an action itself, induces the production of vitamin D. Parathyroid hormone, or PTH, again, comes out of the parathyroid gland. It targets the bones and the kidneys, just like calcitonin does, and tells it to release calcium, so get it back up in the blood. It also, via vitamin D, targets the intestines to help us absorb calcium. So parathyroid hormone increases blood calcium levels by telling the bones to release it and the kidneys to save it. It induces the production of vitamin D, which increases absorption of calcium. Again, blood levels of calcium help regulate how much parathyroid hormone is released. This picture kind of sums up those 3 hormones there. When blood calcium levels are low, for example, it tells the kidneys to save it, it tells the bones to release it, and via vitamin D it helps us increase absorption of it. The idea being all of these 3 things will get your calcium levels back up. Vitamin D is a vitamin and a hormone. You can get it in your diet, or you can make it if you're exposed to the sun a certain amount per day. Most of us in Michigan are not in the winter, so we must consume it. It targets the intestines and increases calcium absorption. In fact, some people who take calcium supplements take it with vitamin D to help with the absorption rate. Okay. Here's another picture of calcium homeostasis. If there is an increase in blood calcium levels, calcitonin goes up and the bones soak it up and the kidneys pee it out. If calcium levels in the blood drop down, then the bones release it, the kidneys save it, and vitamin D is released, so we absorb it to get it back up to homeostasis. It's extremely important that we maintain proper levels of calcium all the time. If a person had too much calcium in their blood, would it be due to too much parathyroid hormone, too much vitamin D, or too little calcitonin? It actually could be any one of these things. And you'd figure it out if you were a doctor by taking somebody's blood. Because remember, the definition of a hormone is a chemical in the blood. It changes the function of a target cell. The next gland we're going to talk about is the adrenal gland. It is located on the top of the kidneys and has two regions, the medulla, or the middle part of it, and that's where epinephrine is released upon stimulation by the hypothalamus, and the outside, which is the cortex. The cortex releases cortisol when ACTH stimulates it. It also releases aldosterone, another hormone we're going to talk about, when renin stimulates it. Norepinephrine or epinephrine, used interchangeably, released from the adrenal medulla. It can target almost every cell in the body, but you probably know that it speeds up your heart, opens your airways, and raises your blood sugar. It also increases mental alertness, dilates the pupils, increases metabolism, slows digestion, and slows kidney filtration. So it literally targets almost every cell in the body. We release epinephrine as a result of stress, real or perceived danger, as well as physical problems, for example bleeding or severe pain, that type of thing. Cortisol is released from the adrenal cortex. There's lots of different types of cortisols and glucocorticoids. Essentially, this hormone targets liver fat and muscles and says, hey, the body is stressed, you need to release energy. So it slows down protein making because amino acids need to go into the blood. It slows down fat storage and causes fat release into the blood. It also increases blood sugar. Long-term cortisol can suppress the immune system and cause some other harmful effects. So while it sounds like, great, you're going to lose weight, eventually all of those increased nutrients in the blood are going to be stored back as fat. So long-term stress actually makes you gain weight. It is regulated by the levels of ACTH. The mineral corticoid that we're going to talk about the most is aldosterone. This is a steroid hormone just like cortisol, and it is released when the renin-angiotensin system is triggered. You don't need to remember that right now. We'll talk more about that when we get to the urinary system. But basically, aldosterone tells the kidneys to save sodium. And when you save water, when you save sodium, you save water. Okay, it's because of the rules of osmosis. And we'll go over that again later, but if you need a review on osmosis, look back in your A&P1 notes. When sodium is saved, because it's a positive ion, potassium is lost to balance the charges. So balancing sodium is the first priority in your patients, for example, and then balancing potassium. But screwed up either one, sodium or potassium, can really make the person very sick or have lots of other issues. Again, this is regulated by another hormone called renin and the angiotensin system, and we'll talk about that a little bit later when we get to the urinary system. Although this is not on your list, there are small amounts of adrenal androgens produced by the adrenal cortex. Basically this is testosterone, and in men it doesn't matter because the testes produce so much more. But in women this is their only source of testosterone, and it plays a role in sex drive. The last gland we're going to talk about is the pancreas. The pancreas is located again near the duodenum, as you can see in this picture, is both an exocrine and an endocrine gland. So it's going to make digestive enzymes, and we'll talk about that when we get to the digestive system. But the endocrine portion produces two different hormones. The islet of Langerhans alpha cells produce glucagon and the beta cells produce insulin, both of which play a role in regulating blood sugar. Glucagon, again made by the alpha cells, targets the muscle fat and liver, and it tells them to release nutrients or release glucose or make glucose because the body's sugar levels have gone too low. So when your blood sugar is too low, glucagon goes to your fat cells and releases some fat, goes to your muscle cells and blocks protein synthesis, and it tells the liver to make glucose. All of these things result in elevating your blood sugar levels. Okay, so when blood sugar levels get low, glucagon is released. When blood sugar gets too high, insulin is released. It's released from the beta cells. It targets lots of cells, but the main three are again the same as glucagon, muscle fat and liver, and tells those tissues to soak it up, pull it in, take it in and store it. So insulin is a storage hormone. You want to get that sugar out of your blood and into the tissues. It increases fat synthesis, protein synthesis, as well as glucose storage. Okay, so blood sugar levels regulate both insulin and glucagon. Okay, they're the opposite hormones. This is just a quick little slide that shows you that insulin is a protein hormone. It binds a receptor on the outside. Like a doorbell, it rings the doorbell and tells the cells to do something without itself going in. Because it's a protein hormone, it does not go inside the cell. What it does is open the doors for glucose to go in. That is the function of insulin, to decrease blood sugar by telling cells to soak it up. Melatonin is a hormone released from the pineal gland. It plays a role in the sleep and wake cycles. It actually is at higher levels at night. How much light you are exposed to determines how much melatonin you produce. It's sometimes taken as a supplement to help with jet lag, but if you Google it, it cures everything. It may have a bigger effect in migratory birds and animals that have seasonal breeding patterns than in people. And there is much research about how melatonin changes your sex hormone levels, for example, and the release of gonadotropin releasing hormone, etc. Not completely understood what exactly melatonin does. This last slide just shows some other hormones that we will be discussing as we go through this class. The first one, leptin, is made by your fat cells. Tells your brain you're full. Lots of research with this particular one. Could we give people leptin to suppress appetite, for example? It increases your metabolism as well. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be linked to the reason for people being fat. We tend to eat even when we're full and ignore our leptin levels. But very interestingly researched with leptin. The other ones on this list we'll get to as we go through the different body systems. So make sure you know a little bit about leptin, otherwise you could ignore these other ones as far as memorizing what they do until we get there in the body systems they pertain to. Last but not least, don't forget there's always resources for more information. There's a good online quiz here to help you practice these hormones.